What is up, everybody? Welcome to Sports Magazine Collector. I'm Brad, and today we're going to count down the highest sales for sports magazines in the month of July 2022. Let's go. All right, guys, so we're going to count down the highest sales from July, and it's going to be really interesting to see. But first, I have to give some credit where credit is due, and I'm going to give a big shout out to one of my favorite channels on YouTube, Baseball Card Collector Investor Dealer, in that order, mind you. If you are a fan of sports cards, you absolutely have to check out his channel because it's the best content, in my opinion, that is out there for a sports cards collector. Obviously, I focus on sports magazines, but this channel was really one of my biggest inspirations to kind of step out and start one on my own. Chris Sewell, he runs Baseball Card Collector Investor Dealer. His channel is basically no frills. It is not flashy. It's not gimmicky. It's just a straight up good, honest guy sharing really informative and interesting content for those who like sports cards. And that's kind of the model that I want to portray with my channel. Now, one of his most popular video series is something called High Rollers. And on High Rollers, Chris releases a video every week that counts down the previous week's highest sports card sales. The videos are really interesting. I love watching them, and it got me to thinking, we really need something like that for the sports magazine hobby. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today. Now, obviously, I'm not going to rip off his catchy name of High Rollers, but I wanted to come up with something that's, somewhat of a catchy name for my own to do these countdown lists. So that's how the first episode of Sports Magazine Moguls is being born. Now, Chris has no idea that I'm giving him this shout out. I have spoken with him a couple times through email, and I've had a couple of my submissions included on his videos. He's a super good guy, and I just want to give him credit because these countdown lists are something that I hope to do for a long time. And the thought was 100% inspired by what he's doing with sports cards. So thank you, Chris. I love the channel. Keep up the great stuff. And I can only hope that one day my channel will have even half of the following of what you do. So let's get this thing going. Sports Magazine Moguls, episode number 1. Now, with the sports cards, obviously, they're still getting a lot more traffic than sports magazines. So rather than doing my video countdowns weekly, these are going to be done each month. So today, we're going to count down the top 5 highest sports magazine sales from the month of July 2022. And here we go. Checking in at number 5, we have LeBron James 2002 first cover, and this sold for $3,000 on eBay. Now, this is an interesting one because, as you can see, this is actually a subscription issue. Now, it has the blank label. It's not a traditional subscription edition that has the full name and address printed on the cover, but it is still considered a subscription edition. Now, when you get these blank labels, it's usually because the magazine came with some sort of kind of like rip-off cover on the outside of it. And that was often because maybe it was that person's last issue in their subscription before their subscription expired. And so Sports Illustrated put that cover on there to say, hey, don't forget to resubscribe. Or sometimes they also did like little promotions and contests. And so they would have that outside cover on there. And that outside cover is actually where the mailing address and the name would be printed, thus leaving the inside cover with this little blank white subscription label that you see here. So it is still a subscription issue. However, I do think just from kind of looking at some of the sales over the past several months, I think that the blank label subscriptions do carry a little bit more value. They're not quite a newsstand, but also they're not down with those subscription issues that have the mailing label on it. They're a little more aesthetic because they don't just have some random person's name on there. So this is a very interesting sale here. $3,000 blank label LeBron James first cover. Now let's look at the pop counts. And this is, once again, a little bit unique because on the left-hand side, you can see these are the pop counts for the newsstand issues of this LeBron James first cover. So you can see there have been a lot graded, 187 altogether. And if you saw one of my previous videos, the trivia question was, what's the second most all-time graded issue? This is the second all-time most frequently graded issue, only behind the 1954 first ever Sports Illustrated issue. So 187 times, and you can see there's 34 9.8s. But this copy that we just saw that went for 3,000 in July, it is a subscription. And so that's where you look at this column on the right-hand side. there's a separate pop report or census report for the subscription editions. So you can see there have been less of those graded. There have been a total of 81. I guess you could say 82. I only look at that first column that shows the universal because the other columns, the qualified, just they don't carry as much value. Collectors typically stay away from those. Signature series would be amazing. And if there was that in there, I would count that in the numbers, but it's just almost impossible to get a signature series with CGC as far as a Sports Illustrated issue goes. That's a topic for another video. And then the restored, you definitely would not want one that's labeled as restored. So we're only looking at that universal column. You can see there's been 81 subscription issues graded, and there's only 9 9.8s, which is what this one was. So very interesting here. This number 5, $3,000 LeBron first issue. Okay, moving on to number 4, we have 2021 Luka Doncic and Trae Young first cover, sold for $3,750 on eBay in July, and it's graded at a 9.8. So this is a really interesting issue. Sports Illustrated a couple years ago, they went away from the weekly issues that they had done for decades, and they now only put out an issue once per month. And this is the biggest issue that they've put out since they went to that monthly cycle. These are two, really young budding superstars. Luka Doncic, especially, he has just lit up, the hobby collectors. I mean, sports cards for Luka Doncic were going nuts. And Trae Young has a ton of potential too. They're both all-stars at a young age. And just, the sky is the limit for these guys. So this is a little bit of a speculative issue since, they haven't solidified themselves as Hall of Famers at this point, obviously. But very strong sale here, $3,750. And let's look at the pop reports on this one. Very, very interesting. So look at this, 65 9.8s. And then all those other numbers are really low. Now, I was told recently that of those 65 9.8s, 55 or 60 of them belong to one person. So apparently, there's one guy out there who just bought a massive amount of these covers of these issues when they were released and has sent them all in to be graded and has popped all these 9.8s. So, it may look like this 9.8 is not as rare as some of the other ones, but in terms of how many collectors have one, it probably is pretty rare because I think there's one person out there sitting on a boatload of these 9.8s of this first cover, Luka Doncic, Trae Young. Okay, coming in at number 3, we have the 1954 first issue featuring Hall of Famer Eddie Matthews on the cover. I mentioned earlier, this has been the most frequently graded issue in all of the Sports Illustrated issues. And, I've also shared in other videos that the reason for that is that sometime in the 80s or the 90s, Sports Illustrated, they found a warehouse or they had a warehouse that was full of a bunch of these first issues that had never been distributed. And so they then sold those as collector's items. So there were a lot of collectors that basically got these, unopened, unread, mint condition first issues from 1954, but they got them like in the 90s. And so that explains the high pop counts. That explains the 9.8s. Normally, it would just be absolutely insane to have a 9.8 in this first issue from 1954, almost 70 years old. And the price would be way, way higher. But, I think the market has kind of understood that there's a lot of these out there. A lot of the collectors understand why. So this one comes in at a still very respectable $5,000, $5,044.80. And so even with all those graded copies out there, still selling for over $5,000 for that first issue, I think this is an amazing collectible to have, regardless of the warehouse story, regardless of there being so many out there. Here's the pop reports. So you can see, as I said, 75 9.8s out there, 124 9.6s, and there's been over 500 graded altogether. So still an amazing issue. And this is a strong sale coming in at number 3 for July. Okay, number 2, what an awesome, awesome cover this is. You've got Pele, 1975 first cover, And this one graded in an 8.0 went for $9,600 on Heritage. This is an extremely rare issue. There are not a ton of soccer issues out there for Sports Illustrated. This is probably the biggest one there's ever been. And looking at the pop counts here, this 8.0, it's the second highest graded out there. There's only been, what are we looking at? 5. My screen kind of cuts off there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like there's only been 5 graded. And this 8.0 is the second highest. 8.5 is the highest out there. So such a rare issue. If, in my opinion, if you can find this Pele first cover in a newsstand, you buy that issue regardless of the condition. I don't care if it is just absolutely beat up and it's going to grade a 0.5. I want that. I would love to have a 0.5 of this issue because, once again, you'd be only one of, 6 people in the world to have it. So extremely rare, extremely cool. Soccer has so much upside, and this Pele comes in at number 2 with the $9,600. All right, and number 1, the highest sports magazine sale for the month of July in 2022. You've got a 2003 LeBron James Slam. So this is the first time we haven't had a Sports Illustrated. And to be honest, up to this point in my videos, I haven't talked a lot about other sports magazine publications. Now, there's no doubt there are some that are collectible, and I will be talking more about some of them in some upcoming videos. Slam is probably the number 2. After Sports Illustrated, Slam magazine is probably where you can find some of the sports magazines that would bring the highest value that are not an SI. And so this specific issue, it's not LeBron James' first cover. He actually was on one, I think, a year before, I think in 2002, but he shared the cover with Sebastian Telfair. You may remember that name. He definitely didn't pan out to be a star in the NBA or anything like that, but he was another straight out of high school, really hyped up prospect. And so they were on the cover together, and that was LeBron James' first Slam cover. But this is his first solo cover. And so, first solo covers can still carry value. Sometimes people prefer those over one where a star athlete shared the cover with someone else. And this is pretty awesome. This is graded at a 9.8, sold for just under $10,000 on eBay. And let's look at the pop reports here. So you can see this 9.8, it is a pop 1 of 1 and obviously none higher. So this is the single best issue. It's the single best copy of this issue in the world as of today. And the sale reflects that. $9,995, very strong sale. And that came in as the highest sale for a sports magazine in the month of July. All right, now let's look at some honorable mentions. So these came in for just a little bit less than our top 5, but still think they're cool to look at, still think they're cool to talk about. So let's see what we got. All right, first honorable mention here. We've got a 1992 Sports Illustrated Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, both on the cover, graded at 9.6, and this sold for $2,500 on eBay. So very interesting. This issue has only been graded 2 times. That really surprises me that that number is so low for an issue with 2 major superstars. Now, obviously, it's not a first cover for either of them. 1992 is kind of towards the end of their career, especially for Bird. Magic had a little hiatus there and then came back and played a little bit in the mid-90s, but only 2 of these graded, and this is the highest one out there, this 9.6. Now, something else that I think is very interesting and that makes this issue a little bit underrated is this is the only Sports Illustrated issue that have both Larry and Magic on the cover. And that's really surprising when you think about how linked these 2 superstars were throughout their entire career, even going back to college. I mean, I think it was 1979, if I'm not mistaken. May have been 78, but you had Indiana State, the Sycamores, where Larry Bird was the star, play Michigan State, the Spartans, where Magic Johnson was the star, and they clashed head-to-head in the NCAA National Championship game. Magic and Michigan State won, but, even going back to their college years, I mean, these 2 were it. They were the 2 biggest stars. They were kind of, just pitted together. It was kind of this formed rivalry that everyone else created, the media created. And there for a while, Larry especially, he hated Magic. They went on to become great friends. And into the NBA, I mean, these guys had epic battles. I mean, you had basically either the Celtics or the Lakers winning the NBA championship almost every year in the 80s. And really, these two are largely the ones to thank for reviving the NBA. The NBA was dead in the early 80s. I mean, it was so dead that sports cards stopped producing NBA cards. There were not even any Topps NBA cards made from, I think, like 1981 to 85, something like that. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson saved the NBA because they got people excited about it again. They made it fun to watch. So this issue is underrated. Congratulations to the owner, 2,500. That's a strong sale, and that's a really cool cover. All right, check this one out. 1963 Sandy Koufax first cover sold for $1,995 on eBay. This to me is an enormous steal. Enormous steal. Sandy Koufax is one of the greatest pitchers of all time. The argument could be made that in his peak, in his prime, that he was the best pitcher ever to throw. Now, his career was a little bit shortened with arm troubles, but man, at his peak, Sandy Koufax was untouchable. He is a legend. And to have this cover 60 years old, almost 60 years old, and selling for under $2,000 at a 7.5, that's a pretty strong grade. And you can see there's only been 6 graded, so extremely rare. Now, this is only the 4th highest, so there's several out there that are in better condition than this, but still, wow, this is an awesome cover. And I think that's a steal for whoever bought this for $1,995. All right, next up, we've got a 1998 Michael Jordan graded at a 9.8, sold for $1,950. You cannot go wrong with a Michael Jordan 9.8. I don't care which issue it is. He's been on 50, even if it's one of his commemoratives, whatever. A 9.8 in a Michael Jordan is going to carry some value because, I mean, he's pretty much the most collectible athlete of all time, at least in my opinion. And so this is a great cover. The Man, the Shot. This is from 1998. This was, the big shot to beat the Jazz for the second time and to wrap up the Bulls' second three-peat to give Michael his 6th NBA championship. You got the little crossover on Byron Russell knocking down the mid-range jumper. You can see there 6.9 seconds left to clinch the series and to clinch the title. So really awesome cover, graded at 9.8, strong sale, $1,950. There are 47 of these graded, and there are 11 9.8s in existence today. All right, next up, we have a 2001 Tiger Woods sold for $1,500 on My Slabs. So this is an interesting one because up to this point, all of the sales that I've highlighted have either been on eBay or on Heritage Auctions. My Slabs is another place where you can buy CGC graded sports magazines. Now, there's not as many up there as of now, but it's growing. And I think it is really awesome to see that this issue sold on My Slabs for $1,500. They have really low seller fees, really low buyer fees. So you can potentially find a better deal there. They only sell graded items. So they only sell graded sports cards, graded sports magazines. You can't go on My Slabs and buy any raw issues. But yeah, this is awesome. 9.8, the masterpiece cover. This aesthetically is one of the coolest golf covers out there. One of the coolest Tiger covers for sure. You got him teeing off there at the Masters, and that's an awesome shot. So there have been 26 graded of this issue, and there are 10 9.8s out there, and this one sold for $1,500. All right, next up, we've got a 1966. This has Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player. Probably two of the 3 greatest golfers of all time in Nicklaus and Palmer. And then Gary Player, I mean, he's got to be probably top 10. I'm not an expert in golf, but I know he's one of the great ones. It's not an actual photo. It's a caricature, which to me, maybe makes it a little bit less collectible, but still, I mean, 1966, it's almost 60 years old. And there's only been 4 graded of this copy. This is the 3rd highest, sold for $1,500 on eBay. So I think that's a pretty cool one, and this is a strong sale. All right, 1985 Wayne Gretzky went for $1,320 on Heritage. This one is graded at a 9.4. The great one gets greater. I love it how almost all of the Gretzky covers for Sports Illustrated have something about great on there. I mean, obviously, he is the great one. He's the great Gretzky, but it's pretty cool because when you go through and look at all of Gretzky's covers, almost all of them say something, almost all of them have great in the title, which I just think is really neat. So this particular issue, it's the 2nd highest out there, and there's only 8 graded altogether. So I want to say this is Gretzky's 3rd cover. I don't know that for sure off the top of my head. It's obviously not his first. His first was from 1981. This is his, I think this is his 3rd. I could be wrong on that, but $1,320 from Heritage. All right, now this one is very, very interesting. All right, you may recognize this. You've got Kobe Bryant's first cover from 1998. Obviously, Magic Johnson is also on that cover. This sold for $1,300 on eBay. Now, here's the kicker. This is a raw issue. This magazine hasn't even been graded by CGC, and it sold for $1,300. That is, to me, a sign of growth in the hobby. I mean, you've got people paying $1,300 for an issue that hasn't even been graded. I mean, that's really going out on a limb. And in this case, honestly, I don't blame the buyer at all. I mean, it looks to be in pretty good condition. Really hard to pop a 9.8. So who knows? But heck, even let's say they popped an 8. I'd love to have an 8.0 in Kobe Bryant's first cover, and I think an 8.0 of Kobe's first cover would probably sell for more than $1,300. So this buyer, they're betting on this issue to probably pay off down the road after they get graded. And like I said, do not blame them at all. But that's really awesome to see. Pretty rare to see a raw issue sell for over $1,000. I'm not sure I've ever seen it. I've seen a couple sell in the high hundreds, but wow, this is really, really interesting to see a raw ungraded issue sell. Kobe Bryant's first cover, $1,300. All right, we got another copy of the first issue from 1954. This one's at a 9.6. So we saw earlier that 9.8 was on the top 5, sold for a little over $5,000. And then the 9.6 here is going for $1,267. So as we looked at previously, there are 75 graded higher, and there are 124 total 9.6s, but still super collectible issue. And yeah, this one's going over $1,200 at a 9.6. Very interesting. Same issue, also in the month of July, sold, just not very far apart from each other. And this one went for $1,260. So $7 less than the previous one. That's pretty uncommon for you to see 2 issues like that graded at the same level and go for that close of a price. Very interesting, but hey, I guess that's the going rate right now. If you want a 9.6 of the first issue, is right around $1,260. This one sold on eBay. All right, this one is also, I think, very interesting. So we've got a 1963 Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, first cover, sold on Heritage for $1,200. It's graded a 6.0, and you can see there's the label. This is a subscription issue. So this is our first, what I would call, true subscription issue. We had that LeBron James blank label that came in at number 5 on the list, but I think the blank labels are a little more collectible. This is really interesting. I mean, how many people had subscriptions of Sports Illustrated in 1963? Quite a bit. There were a lot. And so there's probably still a lot of these Muhammad Ali first covers out there with mailing labels on them. But this just shows you how collectible that Muhammad Ali is. I've said on some of my previous videos that subscription issues don't carry much value. And this is a great example of why I need to make a caveat. There is definitely some room for high highly coveted issues such as a Muhammad Ali first cover or a Mickey Mantle first cover, superstars like that, people are still going to pay some money to get their first cover, even if it's a subscription issue, probably because those newsstand issues are so hard to find. They're so hard to come by. And obviously this subscription issue you can get at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost at a newsstand. But very cool that this went for $1,200. And just once again, kind of to me speaks to the popularity and the growth of the hobby, that people are going to pay $1,200 for a subscription issue. All right, and then here is the last of our honorable mentions. We've got 1990 Barry Sanders. This is his first cover. It's graded in 9.2, and this one sold for $1,000 on eBay. So there have been 12 copies of this issue graded, so pretty rare. And this is a pop one of 2 with only 3 higher. So graded very strong. This is a condition-sensitive issue. Very tough to get a good grade. It's a thick issue because it's the NFL preview. So, the thicker the issues, just the more opportunity for, different, different imperfections to pop up. And also a lot more stress on those staples to, hold all that paper. And then you can also see it's got a ton of black ink, and the black ink will show spine ticks and color breaks much easier than the magazines that are primarily white. So very hard to find this issue at all. Extremely hard to find one that's going to grade above a 9.0. And I think that that's a pretty good deal to get a 9.2 in Barry Sanders' first cover for $1,000. So congratulations to the seller on that one. All right, we've now seen the top 5 highest sports magazine sales from July 2022, as well as a handful of honorable mentions. But there's one more thing that I want to talk about. I've said many times before that the hobby of collecting sports magazines is pretty much a combination of comics and sports cards. And so I think it's really important, since sports magazine collecting is still such a new thing, that we keep an eye on what those 2 hobbies are doing. So for that reason, I'm very briefly going to show the top 5 comic sales and the top 5 sports card sales from July. I don't know that sports magazine collecting can ever quite reach the popularity that those 2 genres are at right now, but I think it's what we should strive for. And I do think that those 2 hobbies are the ceiling. And so just out of curiosity's sake, and just out of, just for comparison's sake, we're just going to take a very quick look at what those numbers are. All right, here we go. Very quickly, the top 5 comic sales from July 2022. Coming in at number 5, we had Richie Rich, number 1, graded at a CGC 9.4, sold on eBay for just under $29,000. Number 4, The Amazing Spider-Man, number 300, a CGC 9.8 signature series, sold on Heritage for $31,200. Number 3, Fantastic Four, number 1, a CGC 5.5, sold on Heritage for $42,000. Number 2, Amazing Fantasy, number 15, CGC 5.0, sold on Heritage for $49,200. And the top selling comic from last month was The Incredible Hulk, number 1, rated at a 7.0, went on eBay for $91,500. Now for sports cards, we're only going to look at eBay. There's so many places that sports card sales happen. You've got Heritage auctions, you've got Golden auctions, and there's lots of other marketplaces. So for simplicity, we're just going to look at the top 5 sports card sales that happened on eBay in July. So number 5, you got a 2015-16 Panini Flawless Emerald Gold Proof Lionel Messi autograph 1 out of 1, graded at a PSA 7, and it went for $52,892.92. Coming in at number 4, this is one of the all-time classics. You have the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card, graded at a PSA 2, sold for $61,000. I will just say, this is an example that to me really translates to the graded magazine hobby. I've said many times that I feel some of those top really old vintage issues for Sports Illustrated, even when they're graded really low, I think eventually those are going to carry some strong value. If you've got a Mickey Mantle first cover that's graded at a 4.0, not a strong grade, but just because it's such a desirable issue and because it's such a rare issue, I think eventually people are going to start shelling out some big bucks for that. And this is a big reason why I think that is because it already happens in the sports card world. You have a PSA 2. That means that card is pretty beat up and it's selling for $61,000 just because, hey, it's Mickey Mantle. It's his most desirable card. I really think that eventually we're going to see that same type of trend happen with some of the big time vintage Sports Illustrated issues. Okay, moving on. Number 3 for the sports cards, the 2018 Panini Select Josh Allen Black Prism 1/1, graded at a BGS 9, sold for $69,500. Coming in at number 2, you had a 2020 National Treasures Collegiate Tom Brady Black 1/1, PSA 10, sold for just under $100,000. And then the highest eBay sale last month for a sports card was once again the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. This one graded at a PSA 5.5, and it went for $124,101.52. All right, that's it. First ever episode of Sports Magazine Moguls is in the books. So drop a comment. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear your feedback. Please please subscribe to my channel. I really want this to grow. I want the hobby to grow. I want more people to recognize how awesome collecting Sports Illustrated is. And yeah, that's it for this time. And we'll see you in the next one. All right. You guys didn't really think I'd forget about our trivia, did you? Let's jump to our trivia question for the day. So last week I asked, which Sports Illustrated has been graded the 3rd most times? All right, we've already talked about the top 2. Most graded, we know, is the 1954 first ever issue. Second most graded, we said, is the LeBron James first cover from 2002. So the answer to the 3rd most frequently graded Sports Illustrated issue by CGC is the 1992 Michael Jordan hologram issue. All right, so we now know what the top 3 most common issues are, and we're going to change pace a little bit here on today's trivia question. So today's question, who was featured on the cover of the first ever issue of Sports Illustrated for kids? If you know the answer, leave it in the comments, and the first to answer correctly will get a shout out in my next video. See you guys.